The morning the harbor exploded. There are some mornings that should have felt ordinary. Thursday, December 6, 1917. Halifax, Nova Scotia, a wartime port city at the edge of the Atlantic, where thousands of people were rising before dawn, lighting fires in their stoves, preparing for another day. Children were walking to school through crisp December air. Men were reporting to the railway yards and shipyards and factories that lined the harbor. It should have been ordinary. But by the time the sun fully rose that morning, nearly 2,000 people would be dead. The disaster began at 8:45 in the morning, in a stretch of water called the Narrows. Two vessels met there. The IMO, a Norwegian steamship chartered to carry relief supplies to Belgium, traveling empty toward New York, and the Mont-Blanc, a French cargo ship arriving from New York, its holds packed with explosives destined for the battlefields of France. The Mont-Blanc carried 2,300 tons of picric acid, 200 tons of TNT, 35 tons of benzol fuel, and 10 tons of gun cotton. A floating bomb moving through a crowded harbor. Under maritime law, such ships were supposed to fly red warning flags. The Mont-Blanc flew no such flag. German U-boats patrolled the Atlantic, and Captain Aimé Lemedec chose not to advertise his deadly cargo, so the ship slipped into Halifax Harbor looking like any other freighter. The collision was almost gentle. The IMO, traveling too fast and on the wrong side of the channel, struck the Mont-Blanc's bow. Metal ground against metal. Sparks flew. The impact ruptured barrels of benzol on deck, and within seconds, fire bloomed across the ship. The crew understood immediately. They abandoned ship within minutes, rowing toward the Dartmouth shore, shouting warnings in French that few understood. One sailor reached a railway dispatcher named Vincent Coleman and told him the burning ship was loaded with ammunition. The Mont-Blanc, now abandoned and engulfed in flames, drifted toward Pier 6 in the Richmond district. Smoke rose in a thick column thousands of feet into the clear sky. It was a spectacle, and spectacles draw crowds. People stopped what they were doing. They stood in doorways. They pressed their faces against windows, some double-paned to keep out the December cold. Children paused on their way to school. Mothers with infants came outside. Factory workers stepped away from their stations. Fire was something people understood. The Halifax Fire Department was already racing toward Pier 6, preparing to fight what they assumed was a manageable blaze. For 17 minutes, the Mont-Blanc burned, 17 minutes during which the fire spread deeper into the ship, 17 minutes during which more people gathered to watch, unaware that they were standing at the edge of annihilation. At 9:04 in the morning, the fire reached the Mont-Blanc's hold. The explosion released energy equivalent to 2.9 kilotons of TNT, the largest human-made detonation in history up to that point. The Mont-Blanc ceased to exist, torn into fragments hurled across 8 kilometers. The ship's anchor shaft, weighing over half a ton, was thrown nearly 4 kilometers. The ship's cannon landed 3 kilometers away. The blast wave flattened everything within a radius of more than 2 kilometers. Richmond was obliterated, homes reduced to kindling, schools collapsed with children inside, factories crumbled, burying workers. The force snapped trees, bent iron rails, and shattered every window in Halifax. Those windows became weapons. Thousands had been watching through glass. When the blast wave hit, the windows exploded inward in a storm of jagged shards. People were struck in the face, in the eyes, and in the throat. Ophthalmologists would eventually perform 249 eye removals. 16 people had both eyes taken. 1 in every 50 people in Halifax suffered serious eye damage or blindness that day. Many were children at school windows, watching with natural curiosity. The explosion also created a tsunami. Water rushed in to fill the void, then surged outward in a wave rising as high as 18 meters. The wave swept through the harbor, carrying away buildings, boats, and people. The IMO was lifted and hurled onto the Dartmouth shore. On the Dartmouth side, less than 2 kilometers from the epicenter, sat a small Mi'kmaq settlement known as Turtle Grove, or Kepekek, meaning at the Narrows. At least 6 families lived there in wigwams and small houses. They had been fighting for years to be removed from the waterfront. Just 1 month ago, they had received word they would be relocated to Albro Lake. The move had not yet happened. When the Mont-Blanc exploded, Turtle Grove faced the full force. The community was wiped from existence. Wigwams obliterated. The small Indian school collapsed instantly. The tsunami swept through, carrying away bodies and debris. Oral histories list 29 Mi'kmaq deaths from Kepekek and surrounding villages. Among the dead were children as young as 4 hours old. 2 victims were the children of Mi'kmaq elder Jerry Lonecloud, who had fought for land rights. Their names were Hannah and Rosie. Vincent Coleman had a choice to make. When the sailor warned him, Coleman and his colleague William Lovett began to flee, but Coleman stopped. He remembered the overnight express from St. John, carrying nearly 300 passengers, due to arrive in minutes. The train would pass directly in front of the burning Mont-Blanc. Coleman returned to his telegraph. "Hold up the train. Ammunition ship of fire in harbor, making for Pier 6 and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys." The message was received. The train stopped at Rockingham, outside the blast radius. Coleman's station was 750 feet from the center. When the Mont-Blanc detonated, Coleman was killed instantly at his key. When searchers found his body days later, his watch was destroyed, its crystal and hands blown away. Water stains marked his wallet, evidence of the tsunami that had surged through the railway yards. Coleman was 45, leaving behind a wife and 4 children. His message saved hundreds. Nearly 1,600 people died instantly. Thousands more were injured. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Medical staff who remained mobilized immediately. Medical students were pulled from classes. Temporary hospitals were established in any building still standing. The Chibukting Road School became the main morgue, using a system modeled after the one developed for Titanic victims. Within hours, rescue trains arrived from Truro, Amherst, and Moncton, with doctors, nurses, and supplies. But the city was difficult to reach. Rail lines were damaged. Rescuers walked through wreckage. 2 hours after the explosion, word reached Boston. Governor Samuel McCall immediately offered unlimited assistance. A relief train left Boston that night. And then, the next morning, the weather turned. On December 7th, a blizzard descended. Snow accumulated to 40 centimeters. Winds reached 55 kilometers per hour, with gusts over 90. Temperature dropped to -4, with wind chills of -15. Blowing snow created whiteout conditions across the ruins. Thousands were still trapped under rubble. Thousands were homeless. The heavy snow buried debris and bodies. The relief train from Boston was delayed by snow-blocked tracks. The city, already devastated, was now buried under winter's assault. But people persisted. Volunteers worked through the blizzard, pulling survivors from buildings, setting up canvas tents. By late January, around 5,000 were still without adequate shelter. A reconstruction committee eventually built 832 new housing units. The Halifax Explosion Remembrance Book lists 1,782 confirmed victims. Approximately 250 bodies were never identified. Some remained hidden until spring. The last body was not recovered until summer 1919. The explosion destroyed 1,630 homes and damaged 12,000 more. Fort Needham Memorial Park now stands on a hill overlooking the harbor. Every December 6th at 9 a.m., people gather to remember. Names are read aloud, bells toll. Halifax sends a Christmas tree to Boston every year, a tradition begun in 1971 as gratitude for the aid that came. The Mi'kmaq community of Turtle Grove was never rebuilt. For decades, the story was largely forgotten outside of Mi'kmaq oral tradition. Only recently have efforts been made to honor their memory, to speak their names, to acknowledge they too were victims. The Halifax explosion was the largest non-nuclear explosion ever recorded at the time, but beyond statistics, it remains a story of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary horror. A morning that began like any other, 17 minutes during which a burning ship drifted while thousands watched, unaware their world was about to end. Glass turned into weapons, water into a destroying wave, and at the center, a man at a telegraph key, sending his last message, saving lives even as his own was forfeit. The morning the harbor exploded, the world learned once again that disaster does not announce itself with fairness or warning. It arrives on an ordinary Thursday, disguised as a routine collision, a manageable fire, a spectacle worth watching, and by the time you understand what you are seeing, it is already too late to run. If you found this exploration of the Halifax explosion compelling, I would appreciate it if you would take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are more dark chapters of history waiting to be told, more stories that deserve to be remembered with care and respect. I will be here to guide you through them. Until next time, remember that history holds lessons if we are willing to listen. The past is not distant. It is always there, waiting beneath the surface, ready to remind us how fragile our ordinary mornings truly are.